Okay, it says we are live. So, hello.
Hello.
Oh, what a day! I'm glad that we've read this book in the snowy months because I'm looking out the window and I'm seeing snow. So it was very atmospheric in the sense that I was in it.
Yeah, it did really help.
Yeah,
it did help,
especially with the snowstorms that we've recently had here in Wisconsin.
I know.
Well, everyone who is joining us for DoubleBookedCo's book club discussion, please feel free to say hello in the comments, whether you've read it, DNFed it, or didn't read it all. You are all welcome here. Feel free to say hello to us and comment on anything with the book. Before we get into the discussion of the book that we read for February, which was David Guterson's Snow Falling on Cedars, let's recap on the book that we chose for March and what is coming up for that. Did you want to mention that, Laura? Or
Sure. I don't have the book next to me.
I have it.
You do. Okay.
Yep.
So we're going to be reading Green Glass House by Kate
Melford.
I always think it's Mitford, and it's not. So it's middle grade, and it should be really, really interesting. It's about a smuggler's inn in the winter season, and a little boy and his friend try to solve a mystery. What's going on? I'm excited to read that one. I know you are too, Dani.
I very much
that's what we have for March. And for April, I joked last time that the theme is dudes, but it kind of is. There's no other theme for it. It's 3 male authors.
Yeah.
So, hopefully there's something in there that you guys will enjoy to be read. I've not read any. It's 2 authors. We have 2 books by one author in particular. I haven't read anything by either of them. Have you?
I have read, so the 2 authors that you're referring to for April, I believe, is Tim O'Brien and then
William Kent
Kruger. I have read The Things They Carried by Tim O'Brien and absolutely loved that book. So the book that we have in our selections is not one that I've read before, and it's a little bit different, but I do like his writing style. I have not read anything by William Kent Kruger, so April should be interesting, to say the least. But yes, I am very excited about our middle grade pick for March.
Me too.
And so the next time, for anyone who is going to be joining us in reading Green Glass House, the next thing you'll see on our channel will be the productivity sprints on the 6th. So March 6th, which is a Sunday, we'll open up with our live launch for the Etsy shop, which will be at 4. And then at 4:30, we'll switch over to the productivity sprints. You can read this book. You can read a different book. You can do chores. You can do crafts. You can do whatever you'd like. But I'm pretty sure that Laura and I will probably be starting this book.
Yeah, I really want to. Yeah.
Okay, so we do have a few joining us right now. So I want to say hello. Oh, I'm so happy you enjoyed the book. That's wonderful.
Nice.
Very good. And Mary's here.
Hi,
hello.
Mary.
Hello. I know I think Mary and Allie were going back and forth about a few things. This is really funny.
I know. I just saw stuff. My phone died last week, and I haven't logged in again to Voxer or Discord, so I've missed all mentions of anything the last 2 weeks, essentially, until just like 15 minutes ago. I was like, oh, I have to log in. That's why I'm not seeing anything. So I missed all the conversations, but I did see a little bit of it, and it was very funny. It cracked me up. So
Yeah. So, and to that note as well, if anyone out there is not part of the Voxer group and wants to join the Voxer group, just let us know, and we'll add you. You can be added to the Voxer group at any point in time. So, looks like Kim is here.
Hi, Kim.
Hello, Kim. And we have new kid on the block, but looking forward to reading Green Glass House.
Nice.
Such a good choice. Yes, we are very excited to read Green Glass House. I've never read from this author, and I try not to read the back too much. I've heard it from when we first put it out there, but then I try to like push it out of my mind because I do like to be, surprised when I'm reading. And middle grade is just one of those genres that I have so much fun with, but I really try to only read in March because otherwise I'd be only reading middle grade.
I know. It's so much fun, and I forget how nice it is until I start reading it, and then I'm like, God, you idiot. Why don't you read this more often? Come on.
Yeah,
very easily
so I'm
just read it
excited.
all the
I do have a bunch of middle grade selected for this next month, but I still have like half and half, like adult literary fiction classics and then middle grade. So well, welcome, Jenny. It's so nice to have you.
Thank you.
Again, if you have Voxer and you'd like to join the Voxer group, you don't have to. It's not, a prerequisite, if I could talk, to being part of the book club. But if you would like to, just let us know what your handle is and I'll get you added to the group. Okay. So as you pop on, please feel free to say hello. If you're watching this in replay, feel free to comment in the comment section anything that you would like to add. If you feel like we missed something or you wanted to add your own thoughts and discussion points, always all comments are welcome. So please do so. Lots of things to discuss in this book. And again, we are discussing David Guterson's Snow Falling on Cedars, which was written in the 90s, I believe. But I feel like it still holds up pretty well. I think I just saw 1990. Yeah. I feel like it holds up pretty well considering it's I wouldn't call it historical fiction, but it holds up to that time era quite well, I feel. So even though it's written in the 90s, oftentimes we read books from the 90s and we're like, ooh, I don't know that that's the way you would say that anymore. Yeah. But I think it did hold up quite well. And I think the movie was released in the early 2000s.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah. So it didn't take too long for this one to get picked up. So we have a few discussion questions lined up here. Again, just to reiterate that Green Glass House reading sprints will be on March 6th at 4:30. But as always, we try to get this out of the way right away, which is rating the book. So for you, Laura, and everyone in the comments who did finish enough of the book to feel like they would rate it, what would your rating of the book be? 1 out of 5, 5 being amazing. Many people consider this like their Goodreads rating. What did you rate the book?
Well, I literally finished this book 8 minutes ago. To preface, I have not been feeling very great the last few days, and I'm falling asleep a lot the last couple days especially. So I feel like I was reading, and all of a sudden I was like, oh, I fell asleep. And that's me, not the book. So I literally just finished 8 minutes ago. So having had no time to reflect, I'm going to say a 3. Like maybe 3 1/4. But I don't think 3 1/2. I like it, but there was so much in here and I realized that it's literary fiction and it's sort of historical fiction at the same time too. And I get that with flashbacks, there needs to be more information, generally speaking, from everything that I have read. But it just seemed like there was too much here that was unnecessary. Like knowing, I think you guys had talked about this earlier in Voxer before my phone died, and I did see that, that it was so many names and so much coming at you. And it was just like, it didn't really matter. Like, what's the point? What's the point of all the detail of all these dozens of people that you just hear about then and then never again? So that kind of bummed me out a little bit. I don't know. So yeah, it was 3. It was good. I enjoyed it. I don't know if I would read it again necessarily, but yeah, not bad, not excellent, just good. What did you think?
Yeah, I think, so the way that I do ratings is I have a 3-fold scale that then is averaged out. And I think the average ended up being a 4. I wish I had my book with me. It's literally in the other room because I just built my March TBR. But I think it's between a 3 and a 4 for sure. Yeah. But I agree with you with so my 3 layers are content, engagement, and creativity. Content meaning the writing style, how it's written, and if it's, a simplistic writing, or is it more advanced? And I definitely agree with you with the sense of the description is just too much in a lot of the book, and a lot of it is unnecessary. So I'm guessing I might have given it a 3.
Yeah.
Or maybe the engagement for me, the first half of the book was like a 2.
Yeah.
And then the second half of the book was like a 4. Because then I was like really wanting to find out like what is going on, like what is going to happen to this poor Cabo. Like there's no reason why he's even detained at this point. So my engagement went up towards the middle of the book when they start to get away from more of the description and really getting into the actual plot. And then the creativity, like I really liked the idea of the book. I really liked the purpose of this book. I liked the message. This book is full of prejudice and racism and just awful things. And I think it's so true to what would have happened. It's so true to how people looked at one another then and even now. So I feel like that was really a high part for me, is that I feel like it was a book that needed to be written just on that message alone. So I want to say I think I rated it like a 4 when it all came to be said and done. Just because I did really like the message. I really did like the idea that was being provided by the writer. I just feel like the writing style was a little overkill and it was just a lot, and it was unnecessary at times. Let's see what we have here. We have, Mary gave it a 2 on Goodreads.
Yeah.
Mary, do you have any other thoughts, like any reasons of the 2? And then it looks like Kim stopped at 40%, and she would have given it a 3 at that point. Good for you for stopping, Kim. Don't read stuff you don't like. And being part of the discussion, you can find out all the spoilers here, and then what happens in the book. Oh, we have a 5-star.
Nice.
Let us know how you came to 5 stars. Because everyone's rating is their own, because we all come from different walks of life. We all like and appreciate different things. There's books that, like, for example, I just recently read Eat, Pray, Love.
Yeah.
And I hated that book with a fiery passion. But Laura, you really resonated with that book. You really loved it.
It's one of my favorites.
Do I make fun of you for that? No. Do I say that it's invalid? No, because that's your experience with the book. That's all. So I'm glad we have a little bit of differences in ratings.
Yeah.
Because everyone, it all counts. That's awesome. So we have a 2 and a 5. It looks like Mary says the writing still is what lowered my rating so much. Oh, the writing style. Yep. Yeah.
I think that I would have maybe enjoyed it more and sung into it more if I didn't read it so late, and that's my fault. Because I like descriptive stuff. I don't mind details. Like I say this as an example all the time, but it's a really good example. Henry James. I love Henry James. And he is nothing but extremely verbose. Like, so I get it. I feel like I could have gotten into this. And if I would have read it when it first came out in like 95, 96, whenever that was, I think I would have really liked it then and probably given it a 4 or 4.5 or maybe even a 5. But reading it now, kind of under the gun, again, not feeling totally great too, but just sort of, I know. Yeah. Romance talk.
And then she mentions too, the overkill of the romance talk annoyed me. It didn't really feel like it fit. I would have to agree. It felt so disjointed in the sense that there were 2 stories happening that kind of correlated, because if you think about it, both stories, the nut of their story is racism, is prejudice. But they're also so disjointed in the fact that they didn't really mesh well together. And I know Mary and I discussed this a little bit in Voxer, like the description of male anatomy is just absolutely ridiculous in this book, and so unneeded, and so like it's just every time it happens I'm like, are you serious? Like, what does this matter? Why is this in the book? Like,
I know, penises and boobs. I was like, why are we hearing about this woman's breasts so much?
Yeah, like, I don't know.
I just don't. And I am no prude. I know you're not either.
Yeah.
Like, it was really like, okay, why?
Yeah.
Why? Dude, why?
Yeah. Okay, so we got some ratings out of the way, and this next question, kind of the first question that we're going to talk about, kind of goes along with what we've been discussing. And I guess we kind of found out too that Kim kind of is DNFing the book at this point, possibly. But we didn't really hear, like last month for Atonement, we had people falling off like every other day, like DNF. Yeah. I'm out. But we didn't hear a lot of that with this book. So either people read it or just didn't mention DNFing or whatever it may be. But we did have a few mentions of the text being somewhat difficult. So some with the descriptions, some with just the writing style in general. But what did everyone feel, or what did you find was troublesome in the text that may have caused you to maybe slow down your reading or walk away from the reading or rate it lower? For myself, the thing that I found most troublesome was the mention of the male anatomy constantly, especially in the coroner's report, when he's kind of like talking about the body, and then he's like comparing Karl Heine's like male anatomy to his own, and I'm just like, why is this in the book? Like, there should be no reason why this is even mentioned. Like, what does this have to do with anything? And then it kind of just continued. It continued and continued and continued, and I was like, I don't know why this is in the book. Like,
his injuries were here, like, not to quote Tommy Boy, but I'm going to, like, not here so much, not here, but right here, you know, like, it was all a head injury. That's what they saw. There's nothing. And I know that he had to do a visual scan and like look at his body and of course inspect everything. Like, so I get that you would inspect his genitals, of course, but the only obvious injury was to his head. That's nowhere near his genitals. Like, why was there such a focus on that?
Right.
And like, he just kept lingering, talking about it. Like, all right, dude, we get it. Yeah, move on. Okay. That's nice.
Yeah, it was very weird. I would say the other troublesome stuff, which we kind of talked about a little bit, was just the amount of description in the beginning. But I understood it to a certain extent. Like, the amount of information regarding like the different families and the generation of, you know, like Ishmael's father being the newspaper owner or whatever. And that made sense because Ishmael was one of the core characters. But you were also getting like all of these you were getting all of these characters information from like characters that didn't even matter. Like, that didn't even exist later, because like 100 pages in, that's where you discover it's Kabu, it's Hatsu, Ishmael, Karl Heine. That's it. Those are the 4 characters that we care about. That's it. But in the beginning, we had all these people that were being discussed and like named, like first and last name, their heritage, if they were part of the war, how long they'd been there.
Right, what kind of farm they had.
Yeah. And I get that it was establishing a idea of these different immigrants, these different people, and how long they'd been there, and the significance of their heritage. But when it comes down to it, the book was really just about white versus Japanese. That's what it was about. So that I felt was a little bit troublesome to me, because
Yeah.
it starts you out thinking that you need to know all these things. And realistically, once you're 150 pages in, you realize you have 4 core characters, and those are the characters that you need to focus on. So, to Kim's point, trying to get into the book, it was difficult because there's just so much happening. And thankfully I was listening to an audiobook. So I just, kept going while I was doing something else. But if I had been reading this book, it would have been really difficult for me to focus, because there's just too much going on.
Yeah, I was flip-flopping between listening and reading. And all of these Norwegian names and everything was like this, it just sort of became a blur. I was really trying to get it like going and everything, but it's just sort of a blur. And I think I asked you because you were way past it at this point. I was like, okay, what do I do here? You're like, no, just keep going. It doesn't matter. Like,
yeah,
it's fine. It's fine. And I really appreciate you saying that to me, because I was just like, how much do I have to really concentrate here? Like, do I have to make a list of people?
Mm-hmm.
No, I don't. I really don't. So
yeah. That's one nice thing about audiobooks is, for me at least, when I know a book's going to be difficult for me, like a perfect example, I just finished Wicked, which I started trying. I was reading that book. I think I started that book 3 or 4 times, and I was like, I can't get past the first like 30 pages. It's so there's just, I don't understand what this is doing. And I listened to it in audio in 2 days. So if anyone is out there and you're like having a book that is super difficult to read, try to find the audiobook, because you can push through some of these hard pieces, because like some of the descriptions are just way too much, just ridiculous.
I had a hard time with Wicked too. I've still never read it, and I've tried 3 or 4 times, and I just I'm like, I just don't, but you said that, I was like, I've never tried the audiobook. I just pick up the book,
Yep. Yeah. Okay. So, kind of moving on in the same vein, and a lot of the questions, they flow, within each other. And we've been talking about the descriptions and how the descriptions are so much in this book. And in the early stages of reading in our Voxer group, everyone kept saying, how many times is he going to say snow? How many times is he going to say Cedars? Why is he like, there's so many times that he says things, and it's like, why? And Allie in our Voxer group, our lovely Allie, who is our she's like our resident curator. She finds all of the nerdy things, which I love. She had done a poll for us because she was reading an ebook, and her e-reader is able to pull how many words are mentioned, and she was able to find how many times the words snow, Cedars, variations of like Japan, and then Japanese, and then German are mentioned in the book. And she found that they mention snow 122 times, Cedars 90 times, variations on Japan 152, with Japanese being 135, and then German only 14, which I found very interesting considering this is World War II, and the Germans, I feel, had way more of a negative piece of World War II than the Japanese did. But understandably so. We're, on the Pacific coast. Pearl Harbor just happened. Understandably so. But anyways, going back to this particular question, the question being, what makes these words so significant to the text and important to be used so frequently? Now, Allie made a really good point. Are we only recognizing snow and Cedars because it's in the title? So, because it's in the title, are we already predisposed to hear and see those words? And then, because Japanese, like, to me, after she had mentioned that, I was like, you're right. But I'm expecting Japan and Japanese because these people are Japanese. But because snow and Cedars are so, they're not the point of the book. It just so happens that it's like snowing when this is happening. Like, so for me, it's like, stop saying it. Stop it.
Mm-hmm.
So why do we think these are so significant to the text or important, and maybe the importance of why they are so frequently used? Do you have any thoughts on that?
I really don't know, because I didn't notice snow or cedars. I mean, I noticed cedars a couple of times, but it made sense in my brain. And again, not feeling great, so give me a grain of salt here. But it made sense because they kept, at least Ishmael kept referring back to the cedar tree that he would meet Hatsue in. And like, so that kind of made sense. And talking about the cedars on the island, like, I kind of got that, but I never noticed snow at all. Like, it was mentioned because it was snowing or something, but I didn't get it till now. And the Japanese thing I did, JAP as a slur, like that word, that makes me so furiously angry. So every time I said that, I got so mad, which I know it's not a great word anyways, but
Yeah.
Correct to the times, I'm sure. And that I noticed. But German, I never even thought about it.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. I feel like I'm just rambling, but I didn't notice that abundance of snow or cedar that much. What did you think?
It bothered me a lot.
Yeah. Okay.
And I don't know if it's because I listened to it on audio, so it was like constant.
Snow. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, but I think when you finish the book and you think back on what you've read, and you think about, I always think, like, why does an author title something the way they title something? And for this particular reading, Snow Falling on Cedars, the snow and the snow storm that is happening during the trial is so significant because it signifies the storm that is happening with these people. The chaos, the uncontrollable way that life happens. Like, Kabu couldn't control the fact that he was decidedly the criminal here. So I understand the literary device that Guterson decided to use with creating this parallel between this courtroom drama and this snowstorm. I understand that, but at the same time, I feel like it was a little overdone. It was a little like hitting me over the head with a cedar branch to be like, hey, this isn't just snow. It signifies the uncontrollable, chaos within these people's lives during this time, which I got by itself. I got that in its own right. Like, I got that just based on the fact that these poor Japanese people who had lived here for so long and worked the land for so long, and it was their home, were being treated as if they were complete, newbies, like they just got there or something. And even if they just got there, like it just, there's a lot of stuff. And you mentioning the prejudice and the racism in the way people spoke to one another. Yeah, German, I recall hearing it when they were describing like who Karl Heine was and that he was a German immigrant, and there was a few others that were German immigrants, and then his conversation between himself and Kabu in the boat, they called each other names, he called him, a Jap, and then Kabu called him a Nazi, and, then they shook hands, and that was that, So the amount of prejudice in this book, I think, speaks for itself. And I didn't need the constant reminder of the snow and the cedars.
Yeah, and I see that now
too. The cedars really signify the love affair between Hatsu and Ishmael, because those were the only two that really were in that area of the island. And there's really like 4 areas. There's the Cedars, the strawberry fields, the harbor, and then like the mainland. And so it's interesting to see who really is part of those areas. So we have the fishermen in the harbor, the teenagers and the Cedars, and then the farmers in the strawberry fields, and then basically townies, I would say, in the rest of the area. So I don't feel like I needed to be slapped over the head so many times with the fact that it was snowing. Because I don't feel like it really,
I haven't looked at this since the beginning.
Oh, the map, sure.
Yeah. You're talking about all places, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So anywho, yeah. So, I mean, I think they're significant in the sense that they were used as a device by the author to like create this melodramatic background. But yeah, not I feel like it was just too much. Mary says hearing that word got me each time too. Laura being half Japanese, it stung. But I know it was the time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. It was a lot, and I feel like the prejudice wasn't really addressed very well, in the sense that I don't feel like there was a conclusion to the amount of racism and the amount of prejudice that was happening. I think the way he did address it, though, was through certain characters. Like Ishmael's father tried very hard for his entire career to be fair and welcoming to everyone. And he lost business by doing that, but continued to do that. And I think by him being, and this is a completely different tangent, but I think for him being such a righteous example is what really, in the end, finally made Ishmael like do the right thing.
Yeah, finally.
I think it took Ishmael a really long time to understand what the right thing to do was, because he had so much hate inside of him because of the war and because of losing his true love or whatever. And so when he was in the war and saw all the terrible things he saw and then lost his arm, he immediately puts all that hate into Hatsu. Like I hate, like numerous times I hate her. And
in the store too, like when he was behind her, I was like, whoa, dude, you gotta...
And you understand it because it's that post-traumatic stress disorder. It's a lot of that. But for him, it took him so long to like click. Like, you were teenagers, okay? Get over it.
Yeah.
And then to have his mom basically try to route him and remind him of his father and what his father stood for and how his father was, stood up for everyone. Then he was finally like, oh, this is the right thing to do. So, I mean, I appreciated that the author put some pieces of good in there, but I don't feel like he ever really concluded any kind of press on this racism. But is there ever a clear conclusion on that? I mean, this was in the 40s when it was at its height, based on Pearl Harbor and the current war. I mean, we don't even see that today. We have chaos in our streets today because of racism. It's ridiculous. So, I mean, to leave that open-ended is true, I think, to nature. Yeah. But in a book, you're like wanting everything to close up with, perfect little bows on. So It looks like Allie has joined us.
Hi, Allie. Good morning to you.
Dani just mentioned the storm as a metaphor, and yes, I felt that it was so heavy-handed. I wouldn't have felt this perhaps if I hadn't been thinking the writing in the book was so undisciplined. Absolutely. Yeah, Allie, we were talking about all the great points you had brought up too, with the amount of times things were mentioned as well. So thank you so much for being our resident nerd, because we like it a lot. She's also disappointed that the German versus Japanese heritage as insiders versus outsiders based on race wasn't better developed. Yes, completely agree. And I think that is actually our next question here, Allie, is talking about the insiders versus outsiders in the text and how their status played a role in the story. So this question can really define this racism conversation as well, because we did throughout the whole book, we have those, insiders and outsiders, and who was trusted and who wasn't. And I think geographically for the island, you can split those up very easily to decide who are insiders and who are outsiders. As you read that question, Laura, do you have any first thoughts of what you feel were meant to be seen as insiders versus outsiders of the text?
Yeah, I mean, just generally, I didn't think about it a ton when I was reading it, because it was, again, very heavy-handed, and it was very obvious you're supposed to think of the white people as the insiders who knew everything and they were in the right and everything else, and Japanese people, even though they had been there for decades and or generations, were the outsiders. And it was just I don't know, it's so stupid. I just think it's so stupid, but I get it, and I get that it happens all the time, and it's happening today with all different groups of people all over the place. It's not just here or then, but yeah, I just felt like it was white people were correct, and anyone who was not white, so pretty much just Japanese people then on the island, was in the wrong. No matter of anything else. It was just, oh, well, you look like this, or your parents were from there, or you're from there, so that must mean that you agree with this, and then you are bad, and
get out of there.
You're the outsider or whatever. I just, yeah. What do you think?
Yeah. Well, and I think that's what was so interesting, and to Allie's point of mentioning that German was only brought up 14 times.
Yeah.
For it being World War II, and from what we know of World War II, I would have thought that the insiders would have been, more of your, Irish or, Norwegian, anything that was not German.
Right, German. Mm-hmm.
And then it would be German and Japanese would be the outsiders. But it was basically, if you look anything that is not white, you're an outsider. Yeah. And like you said, even if they were there for generations, because I believe that Kabu's family had been farming these strawberry fields since the late 1800s.
Yeah.
So it was generations of families that had been living there and cultivating these strawberry fields.
Yeah, for 50 or 60 years by the time the crime happens.
And they're still considered you don't actually belong here, which was heartbreaking, because in every instance that we saw these men coming to talk to the white men, they were so obliging and bowing and, so kind and proud, but not, overly, they weren't cocky. The only time we saw a little bit of pushback on that was when Cabo came back from having to be in an internment camp and wants his land back, his family's land that they've been farming for generations on a verbal pact, because they can't actually own land, but the white man can take your money. Sure. He can take your money and say it's a lease, but technically if you went to the law, it would not be okay. Like, you don't actually own that land, which was heartbreaking because they were so trusting.
Mm-hmm.
They were so trusting in these landowners that they were going to get these 7 of their 170 acres
Right.
to cultivate, and it just was so sad. And then so when Cabo is coming, all of a sudden it's not that he's upset that his family's heritage is being taken away. It's, oh, he's gonna start trouble, and he's you know, a villain now because he's upset.
Mm-hmm.
I would be upset too. Are you
Absolutely
kidding me? This is his family. This is his. They missed 2 payments.
Mm-hmm. Because they were
Of
gone.
which
Right.
they tried to pay one of the payments, and Carl
Right.
Sr. was like, no.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I respect you, and you will have this, and I'm so sorry, and is there anything we can do? And then
Right.
his racist wife
Mm-hmm.
is like, no. And then, of course, he dies, and then she gets to be like, screw you, and sells it to somebody else. Like,
Right.
it's terrible.
Mm-hmm.
So going back to the question, you know, the insiders versus outsiders, it's literally, it was white or Japanese.
Mm-hmm.
If you weren't white, you were an outsider, regardless of how long you'd been there.
Right. Or how well you know somebody or anything, it didn't matter.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, going back to the geography on that, you know, as you look at the island and you look at the map that we have of that space,
Mm-hmm.
you know, it's really the farm land and the rest of everything else. So yeah, I mean, it's heartbreaking to see these people, especially too, and you can talk on the feminist piece of it all, because even within the heritage that we find with the Japanese people, especially in Hatsude's family, she is constantly told to be calm and subdued, and, you know, don't speak up and be ladylike and all of these different things, which I feel really sets the stage for how she then interacts with Ishmael and then interacts with Cabo, who she later marries, and how conflicted she is in her own feelings. And we'll get to that in a little bit, but to the point of the book, there are a lot of topics to talk about. So, you know, for those of us who really liked the book or didn't like the book, I think regardless, the book has a lot of topics to talk about. There's a lot of discussion that could be had without talking about the way in which it was written. I think there was a lot that was underdeveloped with the topic of racism. I think there's a lot underdeveloped with the topic of feminism. I think there's a lot underdeveloped in a lot of space. But that doesn't make our conversation any less valuable, because we can talk about those topics without actually needing any more help from the text. Right. It looks like Jenna has joined us. You're never late. Always on time. Anytime you join us is perfectly fine. She mentions racism portrayed in the book has a direct correlation to the Japanese internment camps. Absolutely. Yeah, we have that generational kind of before the 40s, then the war, then after, when everyone's back, and kind of how they're reacting to one another. Absolutely. And then she mentioned this interesting thing, that there's a map. Was it useful for anyone? I listened to the audiobook and didn't realize there was one. I'm not sure it is needed. So I have a physical copy of the book.
I love a map in general. So
yeah.
I was like, oh, a map.
Yeah. I didn't never look at the map until today.
Yeah.
I feel like I always had a map in my head. And in reading, I always forgot that it was an island. I always think it's like just a coastal. Like I just felt like it was a
Okay.
coastal town, not a full island.
Yeah.
But in, creating discussion questions and just talking about the book in general, when you look at it and you see the map, it makes more sense to the way in which they described certain things, but I don't think it's necessary.
No, I mean, when I first opened the book, I was like, oh, a map. And I really studied it for like 10 or 15 minutes trying to like memorize place names and all the bays and coves and points and stuff. I thought, oh, they're all named and all the stuff is on here. It must be important. Mm-hmm. And like 80% of this doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It's just like, generally speaking, to know where, okay, Kabuo and Hatsue's house is, and then, well, the Jurgensen's house and the harbor and Karl Heine's place, like, that's informative. So you can see where things are, but nothing else. Like Indian Knob Hill, am I forgetting a mention of this? I don't remember this in the book at all, but like, why is it on here? So it's nice, but totally does not.
I think it's necessary. Yeah.
No.
Yeah. Okay. So after that insiders outsiders question, we had a question regarding the citizenship and the land ownership in the story, but I feel like we kind of already touched on that a little bit with the last question. Too. So I think I'm going to skip that one as we are already at the 45 mark. So let's talk about what everybody wants to talk about with this book, and that is the Teenage Tryst.
Yeah.
I know, Laura, you and I kind of discussed this a little bit prior to us starting our live, and we both found that it was completely irrelevant to the story. But let's talk about it anyways. So the teenage tryst between Ishmael and Hatsu plays a pretty big role in their teenage years, and then has everlasting effects. More so for Ishmael. But let's discuss those implications and how they affect their adult lives. Specifically for Hatsu, and I think I kind of mentioned this a little bit with the feminism piece, but I feel like because of the way that she was brought up and the way that she was told to conduct herself in public and with men or boys, I feel like she was extremely conflicted the entire time that she was with Ishmael, which started as a friendship. And I feel like he really pushed more in the direction of a romantic nature than she did. I feel like based on what we read of their interactions and her internal monologue, I feel like she was consistently confused. I feel like she thought it was like love, but I think it's because of the way that Ishmael would present it. And as we see her interact with Ishmael and then later with her husband, she literally says, when she has the sexual interaction with Ishmael, her first thought as it happens is, no, this is not right. No. And makes him stop, which he does, which is great, because I would have been even more unhappy with this book if it would have went any further.
Yeah.
And then when she is in her marital bed with her husband, and we're just going to say it, enters her, which is what happened previously. Her first thought is, yes, this is right. And I feel like for her, I wonder if, had she not been brought up the way she was, could that have been opposite? Was she saying one was wrong and one was right because it was white versus Japanese? Was it she truly was in love with one over the other? I don't know. I feel like she was a pawn in her own life. Now, I'm not saying that she was unhappy with her husband, because it seems like they had a somewhat fulfilling relationship. He seemed very kind and very loving towards her and their children. And she never, left his side. She didn't take that as an opportunity to rekindle anything
Right.
with Ishmael. She never put herself in that situation. And even when he came to her on the beach and was like, just hold me, like another human being, just hold me. And I just wanted to slap him.
Me too.
Like,
I was like, dude,
you're terrible.
come on.
I feel like he was taking advantage of the fact that she was a female and the fact that she was Japanese and the fact that they had this like secret love affair that he had in his mind. I feel like she was always very dignified in the sense that she never led him on. And it was all in his head, like how infatuated they were with each other. I never got that between them. So I don't know. I think he just is like a little woohoo in the head. And the war did not help. What were your thoughts?
I mean, I agree, but I think that there was something there for her too. I mean, she did get something out of that relationship past looking on with that glass box into the water and everything. I mean, otherwise she wouldn't have kept in touch with him. They wouldn't have had this little affair and kept meeting in the cedar tree and everything. I think it was, I mean, trying to remember like the teenage girl thing, like she was supposed to behave a certain way, is how she was raised. She knows she's supposed to marry a Japanese man. Doesn't matter anything else, it has to be Japanese, you know, and she has to be very proper all the time. She is helping to raise her younger siblings. Her parents really rely on her a lot to do stuff and be extremely responsible at a very young age. And this was something secret and just for her. And it was sort of fun for her to sneak away and be like, I'm taking a walk. And then meeting someone who she genuinely, I think, cares about as a friend.
Yes.
Not necessarily as a lover. You know, to meet with him and stay in touch with him and have conversations and talks and stuff. And he was the one that was romanticizing things more. And she was like, well, this is fine. And I care about him. And this is just for me and it's secret. No one knows. And so I think she got something out of it and did enjoy it to a certain extent. But like you said, certainly not as romantic at all as what he thought. And especially after the war too, I think, for him, because he was so injured and all the stuff he was saying about Japanese people that was so horrifying and disgusting. And then to come back and when he sees her on the beach and asks just to hold, I was like, no, dude, this is the very wrong thing to say. She is married with a kid who she is holding. And you're just like, please hold me. Like he couldn't get out of his own, I'm going to say like grief cycle or like fog or whatever it is to see the reality of the situation. It had been so many years. Their lives were so different. And that was just this one very narrow, very emotionally charged period in their life. I mean, emotions are high anyways because of puberty and hormones and everything else. But then to have this forced fleeing of their home to go to an internment camp the very next day and everything, it was, his mind, it was so sped up and so romanticized. And she, like you said, she knew all the time it wasn't really right. And then when he did enter her, she knew right away, no, this is not right. Like that was the deciding factor that kind of snapped her out of her little, I'm not going to say haze necessarily, but it made her really come to herself and go, wait a second, no, this isn't right. And he just kind of got stuck in that romanticism of it, even after all of the hating Japanese people and fighting in the war and losing part of his arm and everything. It was, he couldn't let that go. That was, I think for him too, the one part of his life that was just for him. So it was like a special time for them both, but coming from very different places and didn't really realize, you know?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I think you definitely summed it up a little bit better as far as like her wanting to be part of that, but as a friendship, because he was so different than what she was to be expected to be friends with. So it was a little bit outside of herself, but I don't feel like the level of romanticism. I mean, he was stalking her. Like, let's be real. He was stalking her for weeks before they finally like started to see each other in the Cedar.
Right.
And even then, she wasn't like coming on to him. It was a place for them to be able to vocalize their fears and their feelings to another person that they trusted. So, yeah, I feel for her. And I feel like, and I think Allie kind of put here too, it could have been better developed, the cultural differences, influence interactions, attitude of the characters, and then the oversimplification. Yeah, and Mary agrees. I feel like if you're going to have this affair, we're just going to call it an affair, in the book, it needs to signify more. It needs to have more development to show its true purpose in the text. Because what is this book about? You know, that's always the question too. What is this book about? And the true core of this book is the racism that has caused Kabu to be detained for a crime that is not even a crime. It was an accident that no one could have helped.
Right.
And yet he was detained for 3 months and then put on trial for murder, which was not a murder. And the only reason why he was even arrested was because the coroner said that, oh, this looks like it could be a puncture wound from the Japanese, I can't remember what the stick is called.
Kendo.
Yes, thank you.
Kendo stick.
And because Kabu is Japanese, and he happened to, at the same time that all this was happening, was a little upset about not being able to get his land back. And that racist mother put her 2 cents in. That's it. It's truly a book about racism. And does it need to have this whole Ishmael Hatsu storyline? I don't think it did. Yeah. I think it was completely irrelevant to the story at hand. Now, did that piece have, topics of prejudice and racism? Yes, because of who they were, a white boy and a Japanese girl. But was it developed properly? I don't think so.
No, it was like an odd amount of detail talking about it now with you, because I think it's sort of important for the story that we know that Ishmael and
Hatsu.
Thank you. Oh my God, my mind just shut up. That they had a friendship that became semi-romantic, and that they were each other's confidants in a turbulent period of their life. I think that was an important establishment. So you get Ishmael's involvement in the story a little bit more too, and you see why he is conflicted near the end about giving up the evidence a little bit to a certain extent, and also why in the beginning when he tries to talk to her and she tells him to go 4 or 5 times, like why he just won't leave it alone. Like you get why he was more drawn to her, because he had feelings for her and they're still lingering now. So I think that was important to explain it a little bit, but either go into it more and fully develop it more, or just mention like in a paragraph or over a few pages how their friendship changed a little bit. And like that night before she was forced to leave, that exactly what happened, and how you could flip back and forth quite easily with how they were each feeling internally without having it to be the way that it was. Like either do a lot more or back it up. But it seemed like a strange amount, because you're right, it doesn't really have anything to do with this crime, and aside from the fact that they had a friendship and they grew up together.
Yeah. And Allie's right there with you. It was only there to show his conflict. And I think you and I were talking about this prior to the live stream. But the movie, which I have not seen, I have not been able to find it. I feel like, based on what I can recall of the early 2000s and the previews for the movie, I feel like the movie harbors more on the love story than it does on the actual plot of the book.
Right. That's what I remember too from the previews.
Yeah. So I don't think I'll be watching the movie, because that's my least favorite part of the entire story is the love affair or whatever.
Yeah.
I don't care about that. I care about Kapu and his terrible situation, which I really thought that he was going to end up going to jail for something he didn't do.
Right.
I really thought he was going to. And as soon as Ishmael finds those documents and puts them in his pocket, I was like, done. He is not going to show those documents. He's so prejudiced at this point. He's so against everyone. He's not going to give those. And then to have waited until the jurors were literally,
right,
you know, in the jury room. Like, I mean, they were deliberating.
Yeah, for the second day, I think.
Oh, yeah, the second date. It wasn't even like, it was like.
There were days he could have been like, yo, I found this information out. Let's just call it right now. Terrible. No, he just waits. Waits.
And it wasn't until he gets like some kind of validation from Hatsu that he finally decides like, okay, look at these papers I found. Like, how completely arrogant and self-righteous. Like, you're just so selfish. And the thing is I really did not like Ishmael from the get-go. I really didn't. As soon as he was stalking her, I was like, I don't like this guy. This kid is weird. I don't like him. And then it would flash back and he would be like so obsessed about certain things. And I'd be like, I don't like this person. But in that, you know, moment where they are putting their past behind them, truly talking about it, I was able to empathize with him based on his experience in the war and what that did to him. I was able to empathize. I still don't like him, but I was able to understand his character arc and appreciate his character a little bit more in the sense of what he was representing. I don't feel like it was completely concluded properly. I don't feel like it was developed properly. But overall, I think for the topics the book brought up, I still feel like it is a book that is good to read, because even though a lot is underdeveloped, I feel like the conversation that it creates is the most important part. You know, us talking about these things, or even if you're reading alone, to be thinking about on those things and looking it up. I mean, I looked up the Asian Exclusion Act. I looked up the internment camps. I remember learning about them, but I wanted to see more definitive, like, what were the numbers, how long, what was it? And it's disgusting. And what hit home with me is when Kabu's dad buries all of that stuff so that it can stay in the family. It just, the devastation of knowing that, oh yeah, we'll give all this back to you, but knowing they're not going to.
Right.
And basically just going with it, but like hoping that if you bury this, your family will find it later. And when he was presenting all of that, when Kabu, you know, dug it up and was presenting that to Hatsu, it was heartbreaking, because, I mean, unless you've been through something like that, there's no way you can understand the true just horror of being so put down upon, you know. And even today we have this crisis in the Ukraine.
Yeah.
I can't even imagine. I literally cannot even imagine how that may feel, to be told to leave, and who knows what you will coming back to. So even though underdevelopment of the book is there, I feel like the discussion is much more, I'm having baby brain with no words right now, but there's a lot more value in the discussion than I feel like the book portrayed. Looks like, oh, she's talking about the mom.
Yeah.
Etta Heine. She is dreadful, yeah. Look, she's German, she's awful, but she's European white. She's considered an insider. Yep. Yeah, and I never really thought about that. I forgot that they were German for a while. I kept thinking about Carl was, but I never really thought about the entire family. But that's a good point. You know, she was terrible. She was terrible.
She was.
Yeah. Okay, so we are past the hour mark. I had 2 other questions on here, but reading them now, they are very much questions that we've discussed already. One talking about the snowstorm in general. We kind of talked about what that represented. And then the other one was just more so the style of the writing. So just like the flashback courtroom scenes. I know, I think Jenna had mentioned it, like liking the courtroom.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't mind the flashbacks. I felt like the flashbacks were done well. I don't think I would have liked this book if it was linear. Because I feel like you would get really lost in just like, okay, when is stuff going to happen? Right. So I did like that it started with the end-ish, you know, like the meat of it.
In the courtroom, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and then going back. And I really liked when we finally see what happens between Kabu and Carl.
Yeah.
Because for a long while, I think the assumption is that Carl is also very racist. But I'm sure he was prejudiced to a certain extent, but I also feel like he was trying to do the right thing, like his father was doing the right thing, but he was also conflicted because his mother had such a great influence on him that he didn't want to disappoint his mother, being that she was his mother.
Right.
But ultimately, he did do the right thing. He did say, yep, you know, you're right. That's your land. And, you know, when we get to shore, we'll get that all figured out.
Yeah.
And it just stinks the way that all went down. So I did like the flashback and whatnot. I did like the style.
Yeah. I just looked in the beginning a little while ago and to see like if this was his first book or whatever. Sure. And he wrote a short story collection first, and then it sounds like a nonfiction book, and this is his first novel, it seems like.
Okay.
So I'm wondering what he has written after this and what that is like. I don't think I'm going to go out and like read them necessarily, but if I found one in a little free library or for $1, I would consider picking it up just to see how the style has changed. Because first books are different. I mean, every book is different, of course, but yeah, I think it's interesting. This was his first novel, seemingly.
Yeah, and I think Allie had mentioned that too, wondering if it was his debut novel.
Yeah.
Allie, gosh, it sounds like I hated this book. I really didn't. I just found it frustrating because the underlying issues are interesting and important, but got lost and weren't fully developed. Yeah. I definitely agree with you. And Allie, even that being said, you know, and I feel the same way, I still rated it, I think, a 4. And Laura rated it a 3. So, I mean,
yeah.
And I think, and I can't speak for you, Laura, but I think I can. We're a lot more, like, we aren't very frivolous with our rating. Like, I very rarely give 5-star reviews. I think my average review for last year of all the books reviewed was like a 3.5. So a 3 to me and to Laura, I think, a 3 is not bad. A 3 is not bad at all.
Yeah.
But it's because we take into all these things into consideration of how we rate and why we rate. So even though there's a lot of things that we feel are wrong with the book, I think it still has a lot of value.
It does, yeah. Absolutely. Has anyone out there watched the movie? I'm wondering, because I do have the DVD from the library. I'll watch it the next few days here, but I wonder if anyone out there has seen it and if they read the book also, what they thought of the comparison, if it matched up, or if they did play up the romance angle of it with the two, with Ishmael and Katsuo. That's her name, right?
Katsu.
What's my problem?
You're
Can we just
combining her name and her husband's name.
Yeah,
Tabu
sorry.
and
Yeah,
Hatsu. Hatsua.
Yep. The girl.
Yeah.
If they play up that romance a little more, like our memory of the previews seems to be. So I'm just kind of curious. Yeah. No, you're not spamming the chat.
Oh, it's your fake birthday today?
Fake happy birthday?
I want a fake birthday.
Yeah.
Is that like an unbirthday? Very happy unbirthday to you. To you. Even with your chew, I can appreciate the important topics this book does bring up. Yes, it does. I just wish, I think overall it just needed to be developed more. But I think too, does that come down to a reader's expectation? In a lot of critical theory, you have different ways of reading a text. So there's historical criticism, there's literary criticism, and then there's reader's response. And in most cases, a reader will read a book solely based on a reader's response criticism. And that is based on your own perspective and way of which you have been brought up and your expectations of a text. Now, the more developed you are in learning about critical theory and those kinds of things, you start to integrate some of those. So, for us who have, been taught all these things, our reader's response has layers of historical theory, critical theory, literary theory, and our reader's response based on the fact that we know about all those things. So for us, we look at the historical context, we look at the literary context, we look at the, fact that this is harboring a lot of different political issues, yet they're being underdeveloped. Whereas maybe some of us, our only expectation is we were able to read it fast, it was good, and we liked it at the end. So that's why everyone's ratings are different. That's why everyone's expectations are different of the reading. For me, and just purely on my own expectations of a text, if you're going to bring up the main conflict of a story to be racism or prejudice, by the end of this book, I want somebody to face up to the fact that they're a racist and then be punished for it. So for this book, that didn't happen. So that's part of my issue with my own expectation, that where did that get developed? Where did everyone go, yeah, Etta Heine is a total biatch and she needs to, it just didn't happen. So we have those pieces to our understanding of a text. And unfortunately for me, my reader's response is just way too developed in those other areas that I can't just read a text for reading's sake. Same with when I watch movies, my husband hates it. It's just a movie. Can you just watch it? No, because that would never happen in real life. There's no way that would be able to work. That's what my brain is doing. It's it can't just enjoy it. I have to be that's not feasible. That's not how gravity works. So, so yeah, but I ramble on too much. Too much going on in my head, but
it's okay.
Looks like.
Oh, gotcha.
Got it.
29. I like your baby.
Oh, okay.
Well, happy birthday, Allie. I hope your not quite birthday is excellent.
Yes. Well, I think that's really all that I have as far as questions go. I feel like I've been rambling, but there's a lot to talk about. I mean, we could literally continue talking about a whole bunch of different things, but I think we really should let people go. So that being said, I think unless anyone has any other things they want to say about snow falling on Cedars, I think we're gonna go ahead and put this one to bed. Would you unhaul this book?
Yes. How about you?
I think I'm going to say yes as well. I think I'm
Mhm.
actually going to unhaul Atonement and Snow Falling on Cedars.
Okay.
For the pure fact that I know I won't read this again.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't feel like it adds to my collection. And don't get me wrong, I have a lot of books that I probably should unhaul, but just knowing my feelings of this book and knowing that I won't ever read it again, and I don't really plan on like lending this to anybody. Like,
Mm-hmm.
oh yeah, here's a book you should read. It's not a book you can really lend out as being like, oh, a really fantastic read. Here you go. That I do think I would probably unhaul this.
Yeah. I'm saying yes just because my copy is so beat up. And
yeah.
I did not do this. This is how it came with this big dent, which is through the whole book. So especially at the end, it's just like all these, it irritates the crap out of me. So I'm going to recycle this. And if I ever see it out somewhere for free or something, I might think about it. But I don't think I will reread it. I'll remember the story for a long time. And the reason why I would retain it is to see if my mom wanted to read it, because we share books constantly and she has already read this. So I don't feel the need to keep it.
Yeah.
And it's always going to be in the library system somewhere if I really wanted to read it, because it's enough of a, I guess, modern classic, or it's referred to enough. And I think because of the movie too, it will have more of a longevity, you know? Mm-hmm. So I know I'll be able to get my hands on it at some point again. So yeah, this is going right into the recycling bin.
Yeah. So that then I don't see any other questions happening. So that brings us to then next month, which will be our March read of Green Glass House. For those of you who will be reading this,
I'm guessing there'll be no sex or racism in there.
Yes, it's a middle grade book, so it should not.
Take a big swing. Yeah.
But next time you'll see this is during our reading sprints on the 6th of March at 4:30 Central Time. You do not have to read this with us. If you want to join those productivity sprints, you can do whatever you'd like during that time. But I know Laura and I will be starting that book. And I'm very excited. I'm very excited to read that book. Too. So, okay. Well, I think then we will move.
No one watched the movie or anything?
Oh. Nope.
What did my mom think? She liked it, but she was annoyed by all the racism and stuff, and she didn't get why people couldn't just stop being such a-holes. Also, for a little backup to a little history. So growing up, I read lots of classics and like Little House in the Big Woods and that whole series. We always talked about Native Americans and their plight. I mean, so my mom, being a lifelong reader and a very smart person, we talked about uncomfortable subjects. We talked about Japanese internment camps when I was a kid. So we talked about a lot of this stuff and how I was raised to always consider the other person's feelings, how they would, very empathetic anyways, but we always, let's verbalize that and like flesh it out some more. So my parents and my dad did this too, but my mom was more the reader. So we always talked about uncomfortable things. We always talked about the other side. We always talked about, well, if you were a German living in Germany in World War II and you weren't for Hitler, would you still say that you were publicly just to save yourself? Like, yes, you probably would, You might say, no, I wouldn't. And that's not right. But you would just get killed. And then what's the point? So we always have
self-preservation.
Like yeah, we always have talks like that. And I was always raised to like look at things differently and not just accept facts wholeheartedly and swallow them, and look at history and see what's repeated. So she enjoyed it. But got frustrated by the same things I think we were frustrated by. But again, she read this when it first came out too, like in 95, 96. So reading that, it was different then. It was a different landscape in literature. So I think she liked it, but it was fine. And she didn't keep her copy. And normally she does keep copies of things. She didn't keep it. So yeah, liked it, but not loved it.
Yeah.
Frustrating.
We should get your mom in one of these discussions.
I know. I keep trying. Every time I try to film her, she's like, "Oh my God, again." I'm like, "Yeah, you're fine.
No one wants to see me."
Mm-hmm. So I'm just wearing a t-shirt. I'm like, nobody cares. We're all just wearing t-shirts. It's fine. You should get your mom to do one of these things too.
I should, but she's always got so many things happening.
She does. I know. She's a busy lady.
Yeah. The only book she really liked in my other book club, the book club that I had before I started this one with you, she loved Chocolat. And then she read the entire series, and she's just like, I just love this book. And I was like, you do you. Like, I did not like Chocolat. I was like, oh, this is stupid.
That's one I have yet to
loved
read.
It. She loved it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the book wasn't stupid. It did not, it's
not your thing.
Hit me the way it hit her. Like, she freaking loved that book, and she was like reading all of them. And the third one is like 700 pages or something. It's big.
Yeah.
She flew through them. So, and she's not really a fiction reader. I did see the movie, and the movie was crap. It like, it was like
compared to the book or in general.
Like, take the title Chocolat and put it on this movie, because it like had certain plot points, but like they totally like swapped characters, and it was like, what is this? This isn't even how this happens. The sole significance is that this character was a priest in the book, which is the point, and then you just make him the mayor in the movie, and like totally disregard that the whole fact of the matter is it was like her holistic life like against the priest and vice versa, but she was accepting and he wasn't. And then in the movie it's just like, oh yeah, we're gonna totally take out the main factor of the book and just do it. Oh yeah, don't get me started on movie adaptations, because I'd be like, I have like a coronary. It makes me so bad.
I know.
Like certain movies, I'm just like,
I really liked the movie, but I didn't realize it was a book at the time.
By itself, it's an okay movie.
I haven't read the book yet. Yeah. And I'm sure I will be annoyed. Yeah.
Well, and I had seen the movie like when it first came out. And so I didn't really get it at the time, because at the time I was like probably in high school or something. It was kind of like, oh, it's Johnny Depp. You have to see it because it's Johnny Depp. So you see it and you're like, yeah, it's okay. Okay. Like, whatever. It's like, okay. And then when I read the book, I was like, did I see this movie? I don't think I saw this movie. And then I saw the movie and I was like, I did see this movie, and this is not at all what is in the book. Because I'm a very much like, if you are going to adapt a book, you best do it right. Otherwise, don't do it at all. And last year, all of our books for my book club were all books that were adapted.
That's right, yeah.
So yeah, I had major heart palpitations like all year, because I was like, this is terrible. This is not right. But they were good ones too. Like The Color Purple, I think, did a really nice job.
Yeah.
Jurassic Park did a nice job. No Country for Old Men, I did not watch the film because I don't really like movies like that. But according to Beth Ann, they did a very good job.
Okay.
Like straight lines from the film or from the book. So yeah. Skipping Christmas, which is Christmas with the Cranks, I think that did a good job. That was a good movie. But yeah, I mean, Chocolat just pissed me off. I was like, this isn't right.
See, and I saw it because it was French and Juliette Binoche, and I love Juliette Binoche, and I was like, oh, Johnny Depp's in this? Oh, Judi Dench. Oh.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And I love the soundtrack too. So
yeah.
On
its own, it's good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, Mary, for pulling us back into snow falling on Cedars.
Oh man.
No.
This is what the conversations are like between Dani and I. We start talking about something else and it like jumps to 6 different things, and we're like, wait, what were we talking about? It's been like 20 minutes. Yeah.
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 So anywho, we just want to thank everyone who joined us today. If you're watching this in replay and you got this far, we apologize about the rambles, but we are still thankful for you being here. I only had 2 spammers that I had to block from our thing, so that was cool.
Not bad.
But yeah, thank you all so much for joining us. We will see you next month for Green Glass House.
Yay.
And I also believe in that live launch. So at the 4:00 live launch for the Etsy page, we will announce those 3 books for April.
Yeah.
So check for that as well. And then we'll do productivity sprints with Green Glass House. But thank you all for being here. It's always such a pleasure. And I'm about to sneeze, so that means that I gotta go. So have a good day.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.